All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching the video. Um, so, Adorno, he thinks that story that we watched about the sirens and Ulysses, who bound himself to the mast of his ship, he thinks that's an analogy or a metaphor or hue about this modern society or about enlightenment, about consumerism, because it's about the intellect's domination over the senses, right? So, for example, Ulysses, he needs to focus, should I survive or should I die, right? So those are he thinks in this way. And so he thinks, I'm just going to focus on surviving. I'm going to ignore my feeling. I'm going to tie myself up so that I can focus on surviving. I'm going to put the wax in the ears of my men. And so what is that? What is that? Right. So it's a parable for modern day, the sirens. Right. So these are these singing creatures or singing ladies. And these singers, these sirens, they sing about the past. Right. So in this logic, enlightenment thinking about the past is not really part of this survival or death thing. That would probably be, oh, that's not helping me survive. That's not helping me move forward. So that's helping me go back. So I need to keep going forward. I need to cover my ears and not listen. Singing is a form of art. And as we talked about earlier, art actually goes against the consumerist society for Adorno, right? Art is, it's not about making money. It's not about um, supporting work. It's about thinking about the world in a new way. And so they sing about pleasure and enjoyment. And right, as we learned with Adorno, in the Enlightenment era, like reason and your body and blood and human impulses are kind of against each other. They're contradict each other. So uh, just like enlightenment ignores the past, ignores art, and denies body, blood, pleasure, enjoyment, so does Ulysses. And they both, Enlightenment and Ulysses, both deny these things in order to survive, in order to keep going, in order to work, right? So they focus on survive. Don't think too much about the past or art. Ulysses' men must row like crazy, right? They must just focus on row, row, row. And they have their ears plugged so they don't hear the art, they don't hear the song. They must ignore their senses and focus on work, right? So this is the Enlightenment, Ulysses' sirens. So this is Ulysses, the man who was in charge, the boss who was tied to the mast of the boat. He is the property owner. He is the boss, and he keeps his ears unplugged, right? He's exposed to the song. He's exposed to the temptation, but he's bound to the mast. What Adorno noticed is his power is so secure that it can be delegated. So he can send his power to his men. So this suggests regression, going back. So because he doesn't need to work as much as his men, it shows he's going back. Like he doesn't need to use his power or his body. But at the same time, it suggests increased power because he has control over other people. So something that Adorno noticed is this is like Hegel's dependent master. And that is just basically the idea that whenever there's a master and a servant, the servant actually becomes more powerful because the servant knows how to cook, the servant knows where everything is, the servant knows how to clean, the servant makes the world that the master needs. So the master actually becomes dependent on the servant. So that's kind of what is also happening in this Enlightenment world, in this modern world. So something else, don't think, don't feel, just row, right? So they're focusing on preserving the self. Ulysses chains himself and his workers. They cannot stop working. They deny happiness to himself and his men. Only one thought and one action is allowed. Row, right? They all just row. That's all they're focused on. They produce the same thing as everyone else. Thought and experience are impoverished, right? So the ability to think something different, experience something different is denied, it's canceled. The system of production attunes the body. It like attaches us to the societal machine, and it actually destroys the ability to experience. So like whenever we go to work in this kind of new way, like with the divisions of labor that Adam Smith suggested, it actually disconnects us from thinking, from experiencing, and it actually hurts our ability to experience, maybe to hear song, to enjoy art, things like this. So we're going to look at Adorno's Utopia, part one, his negative dialectics, which is actually his method, his way of critiquing, which we already looked at a little bit. This is how he basically looks for what's missing, what was lost, what's not there, what's that well, not there anymore. That's the negative dialectics. Good. So we saw this. How does Adorno do ideology critique? He uses negative dialectics. All this basically means is he looks for blind spots. So if we remember, like this lady, she didn't realize something about the smart person that she liked before. And then she realized, oh, he wants to go to Antarctica. So she realized that blind spot. And then she says, no, actually, I don't like that. So the marriage example, smart could make you see, do, think things that you didn't expect or want. So something important about negative dialectics is it looks for places where the concept, right, the idea of smart, where, oh, wow, you're smart, so you make a lot of money, and the actual thing, being smart, are different. So that's what Adorno is looking for. Where is the concept of smart, the way people think about being smart, and the way smart actually is, are different. So what does the concept not include, right? What is that in that blind spot that we don't see in the concept? What was lost through the concept that the actual thing has? What's missing? So how Adorno does ideology critique, negative dialectics, that's what we're talking about. So it shows the true differences. This is what negative dialectics does. It shows the real differences, the antagonisms, the things that are the real fighting between the concept and the thought. So the concept and the thought are the concept and thought, the way we think about things is actually hiding something, right? Just like the way that smart hides, you know, some action that some people want to do, some smart people want to do. Maybe they want to build rockets, start a new company, things that might make us uncomfortable. So a negative dialectics, it recognizes the inadequacy of identity. So it's just the same thing. It's just saying that the concept and the way we think about things, the identity is often not enough to help us see the full picture. If we just look at people by their identity, like maybe you might say, oh, Jeff, he's an American, or I might say, oh, a lot of my students are Japanese. And if I just think, oh, you're Japanese, so you must like sushi and not pizza, or something like that. I might just follow the stereotype like we learned in post-structuralism and not recognize who you really are. right? So that's the same thing with negative dialectics. It recognizes the inadequacy of the identity, that it cannot completely capture the thing. So we looked at these examples of Adam Smith. He says, hey, we have a lot of stuff. Isn't this great? But he didn't seem to, I know this is just a simple way of looking at it. I know Adam Smith was very smart, but now thanks to Adam Smith, we have a lot of stuff because of this new way of working, because of the divisions of labor. But something that was missing, something that maybe he didn't think about was, now I don't like my job and I can never escape. Even my leisure time is for my work, right? And so the result is this culture industry. Of course, now we have a lot of stuff. Everybody can own a clock. Everybody can own a TV and a house. Maybe not everybody, most people can own an apartment. But the result is I don't like my job. And even in my leisure time, I can't escape. So that's the blind spot that we didn't realize through this new way of work. And same with Kant, right? He has this new idea, hey, there's a system of behavior through logic, right? I don't need to rely on the government. I don't need to rely on the religion. I can just use logic to decide how I act in the world. But what was missing? Like for Adorno, he pointed out, actually, this new way of logic, even though Kant says it makes us more free, but in reality, it denies our human impulse. It denies our human freedom to show compassion or to show sympathy because our behavior is already decided by logic. So what seemed good actually might not be so good. So here are some other examples of enlightenment today. These are things that Adorno noticed about equality. This is also kind of an enlightenment idea that people are equal, men and women should be equal, and maybe all people should be equal. What does this enlightenment, or does this concept equality suggest? What does equality hide? So this is similar to the way we did ideology critique before, right? We have the surface and then we have the under the surface. So this is just the idea that the concept of equality is hiding something that we need to notice. So it suggests that people get fair treatment in equality. Hey, equality is good. We get the fair treatment. But some things that it hides are, in reality, some people are richer, some people are stronger, some people are more vulnerable, maybe to, like we saw in the news lately about George Floyd, some people are more vulnerable to, being targeted by police or things like that. Some people have weapons. These are things that we don't remember if we only focus, hey, everybody's equal. Everybody's equal. We forgot that these kinds of, in reality, we're not all equal. Some of us have more strength, some of us have more money, some of us are more vulnerable, some of us have weapons. But actually what Adorno suggests in the Utopia is to imagine a better state in which people can be different without fear. Like what Adorno thinks is that equality, it kind of hides the fact that we're different. It hides the fact that some people are stronger, some people are weaker. Some people have weapons, some people don't. Some people are vulnerable, some people are not as vulnerable. But what Adorno wants to do is just say, hey, equality, this idea of equality just blinded us to the reality. But what Adorno hopes is that we can live in a way where we can be different without fear, where we can recognize that some people have more money, but that's okay. I don't know. Some people are stronger, some people are weaker. We can recognize, we can see those things, because seeing is important and recognizing those things is important. And being different is okay. That's what Adorno is pointing to. Hopefully I can explain that in the next few slides. So another thing that Adorno talked about was this idea of pluralism. He thinks that this is also an ideology because it's hiding something. What does the concept of pluralism suggest, and what does it hide? Right? It suggests the peaceful coexistence of human beings who have become reconciled and have outgrown their conflicts, right? So pluralism is to say, oh, well, we're just a big happy world. We don't fight anymore. Everybody gets along. We all live side by side, and it's great. We don't fight anymore. Yay, humanity outgrew war. That's what it seems to suggest. Like we don't fight anymore. We just live together peacefully. But what it hides is that humanity is actually having a hard time finding solutions to disagreements, right? If we think everybody's pluralism, if we think the world is pluralism, we actually forgot that there's still wars. There are still disagreements. There's still violence. There's still pain and suffering in the world. So what is the utopia for Adorno, right? He thinks that ideology refuses to recognize antagonism. And so he sees this pluralism idea, oh, we're all happy, we're all happy. It actually is blinding us to the fact that we still have some disagreements, right? So for Adorno, we must recognize the existing trauma, the possibility for violence, and let people be different and also participate together in life. They need to be allowed to participate. They need to be allowed to be different. And don't force identity or privilege groups. So like we don't all have to be the same, right? That's the way he imagines the better world. So something that is important for Adorno is that we need to look horror in the eye. And if we don't recognize the possibility for violence, the possibility for horror, we will perpetuate it. We will continue it. It will keep going if we just blindly think, oh, the world is peaceful. The world is peaceful. We have pluralism now. We have no more wars. All the conflict is gone. He says, no, take off those blinders. And we need to look at the possibility that there will be horror, that there could be horror. Right? So for Adorno, after Auschwitz in the Holocaust, history has become meaningless. To claim the contrary would be merely a consciousness which is not able to look horror in the eye, and which would therefore perpetuate horror. Right? So this is basically just to say, like, after Auschwitz, it kind of took off our blinders to realize, hey, violence could happen anytime, anywhere, and we need to realize that and accept it. Right? A human being who is not mindful at every moment of the potential for extreme horror at the present time must be so blinded by ideology that he must just stop thinking. Right? So this just basically is just what we've already been talking about. Like this is the good quote by Adorno, that in our world, there's always the potential for bad things to happen. And if we don't realize that, we're just being blinded by ideology. So let's compare Adorno's negative dialectics with Ricoeur's dialectics, which we already learned. So remember this? This is Ricoeur's Ideology and Utopia. And this is a great idea. I like this a lot, but these guys their ideas are different. And I think that they're both valuable ideas, but they're just used in different ways. So for Paul Ricoeur, we have this thesis. We start with an idea, and then we have this antithesis or a utopia, which these two things will combine to create a new ideology, right? So maybe we can think about our example about a company. Like I think before we talked about, yeah, let's make money. Let's make money was our first idea. Let's make money. Let's make money. But then we realized the utopia. Well, maybe just focusing on money alone isn't such a good idea. Maybe we need to focus on diversity and having more ideas, more opinions. And then I say, yeah, hey, that's a good idea. Actually, I've heard that diverse companies actually can make more money. And so if we are more diverse, maybe we can make more money. So these two things will combine and they will create kind of the best idea or like a medium together. And then we have the new ideology. So now we are a company that wants to make money and be diverse. So those two ideas combined. And that's how we progress. Of course, we've talked a lot about rapport in the previous video, so I won't talk about that too much, but it moves in a spiral. It's kind of develops on the previous ideas and combines them. And we grow by learning new information and mediating it through our existing worldview. So that's Paul Ricoeur. But Adorno's idea is a little bit different, right? But oh yeah, sorry, I made this other slide. Let's keep talking about Ricoeur. So for Ricoeur, ideology and utopia compromise. They make a new worldview. So we could maybe think of Enlightenment, a combination of utopia, but there's still some existing ideology. Like for example, something that people noticed about Immanuel Kant was he was actually very similar to the existing ideas of his present society. Like it was almost exactly like the Christianity or the religion of his time. But he was just going about it as a new way, relying not on religion, but relying on logic to get there. So as a result of this compromise, some parts are forgotten, right? So like Kant, because he thought about things in a new way, but he also kept some other of the same way, he made a new step, right? He combined maybe some ideology, some utopia, and then he has the new ideology, which became the Enlightenment. So Adorno's way is different. Adorno's, the ideology and the utopia do not combine, and they do not spiral. Ideology and utopia, they just live side by side. Like they're two different ideas, but they live at the same time. It's okay. You don't need to combine. One person doesn't need to dominate the other. They can both be themselves. They can both be free. They don't need to spiral. They don't need to combine. They just need to live. Just keep going. This is Adorno's negative dialectics. So for Adorno, ideology and utopia, they stay separate. They don't compromise, right? Because whenever we have enlightenment, some important things will be erased. Some important things will be forgotten. And so with negative dialectics, we remember the forgotten parts, right? We remember that, hey, the old way of making a clock actually had some good things about it. We need to remember those forgotten parts because they are also important. So, right, here's this picture of Trump and Biden. So this is just, Adorno's idea about negative dialectics. It's basically the two ways. Often people think the Republican Party or the right wing represents tradition, and the Democratic Party represents maybe the new or maybe the progressive or the utopia. But for Adorno, one shouldn't dominate the other. They should both live side by side. They should both be allowed to participate. One shouldn't be ruling over or dominating the other. They shouldn't combine to one party to erase the other, right? That would be forgetting something important, right? They should be themselves. They should be free. They should be different. They should also recognize the potential for violence, but still try to keep peace. This is Adorno's negative dialectics. So this is the next part of his Adorno's Utopia, non-identity thinking and constellations. So we talked about how the concept hides some parts of the actual thing. So what about a tomato? Is it more like the concept of a vegetable, or is it more like a concept of a fruit? It doesn't really fit these categories well. And really, it depends on who you ask, whether it's a farmer or whether you ask a chef who cooks or whether you ask a scientist. A scientist would say, all of these things are plants. They all have seeds. They're all more like plants. So it just depends on who you ask. And all of these people are just using different concepts to describe, and they're actually not looking at the actual thing. And so we're going to talk about how Adorno suggests, instead of thinking about things in concepts, a new way to think about things, which is called constellations. So for Adorno, he thinks this identity thinking, this is basically just using categories to think about things instead of looking at the individual things. He thinks that categories overlook particulars. He thinks that categories make us miss the details about things. So whenever we call a tomato a fruit, when we call an apple a fruit, when we call an orange a fruit, we are overlooking the uniqueness of tomatoes. If we just call it a fruit, we're not really looking at its nutritional value, its taste, its texture. If we just say, oh, it's just a fruit, then we're kind of ignoring its uniqueness. So whenever we think about, also same with people and things and categories, we are sacrificing and abandoning the individual uniqueness. Identity thinking knows the objects only through correct classification. And right, Adorno does not think this is a good idea. He thinks that we need to look more at the thing itself. Judging via category misreads the object and contains untruths, right? So if we just call the tomato a fruit, we would forget that a scientist would not think about it like a fruit. A scientist would think about it like a plant, and a farmer would think about it more like a vegetable. So if we just judge it by a category, we're actually missing some important things and maybe even containing some false things about it. Objects become examples of their category. This is in identity thinking. So like the tomato just becomes an example of a fruit, and we miss the important things about it, the uniqueness about it. Instead of the unique objects with unique qualities and difference from other things. So right, Adorno, basically identity thinking is bad. It's just ignoring the details. But something that Adorno thinks that is good is non-identity thinking. This is what Adorno suggests, that let the particulars inform the thought. So let the object critique my category. Let the uniqueness stand out and say, well, it's kind of like a fruit, but actually it has this stuff. It has this taste. It has this texture. It has this nutritional value. And so those unique attributes are actually guiding my thoughts and guiding the way that I think about people and about the world. So thought, categories, descriptions must be aware of its own dominating nature and begin to criticize itself. Thought, categories, description should be motivated by a quest for genuine understanding. So whenever we think about things, we should really try to honestly understand it as best as we possibly can, as much as possible. We also should let our thinking acknowledge our limitations to understand completely, right? We're never, I mean, it's going to be almost impossible to understand everything about a tomato. You know, maybe there could be new uses about tomatoes that we haven't understood yet through science. Maybe there might be special parts about a tomato that can be used for different sicknesses, or maybe even help us cure cancer or things like this. So we need to acknowledge our limitations. Thought must also be guided by the resistance it encounters from the object. So maybe a scientist might think of the tomato like a plant, but the scientist should also let the plant or the tomato stand out. It's a unique plant. It's not just a regular plant. It has unique parts, and let that resistance change the way that we think. Thought, categories, and descriptions must recognize that material reality can and should influence thought, influence the way that we think. So like the object itself should change the way we think about the object. Right, so non-identity thinking, this is the good way particulars inform thought. The subject must consider its dominating potential and reflect. So I, the person who is thinking about the tomato, I need to consider how I am dominating the object, how I'm not understanding it completely, and I need to reflect. How am I misunderstanding this? And I need to self-criticize to cancel my domination over the object. Subjects are also objects, right? People also could judge me and maybe just think, oh, he's just an American, you know, he only likes pizza, he doesn't like sushi, right? They could think about me and the stereotypes. But I need to remember that people also, I could be an object of people's thoughts, and that might feel bad if people think about me in a way they misunderstand me. So I need to remember that I could also be an object, and I should be informed by and respond to material reality, as we talked about on the previous slide. Objects must be recognized as non-identical with their own concepts, right? That's basically what non-identity is. It's just that the object is not identical to the concept. So a tomato is not just a plant. A tomato is not just a fruit. A tomato is not just a vegetable. It has its own unique identity. It's non-identical with the concepts. Objects must be recognized as they truly are in order to become more themselves. So here's another way that Adorno does this non-identity thinking is with constellations, which is similar to what we talked about with structuralism. It's just simply comparing, understanding things in comparison to others, things getting meaning through their concept. So I think about constellations as very similar to structuralism. He calls it constellations, which is like this, like seiza in Japanese. So constellations are better than systems because ideas are to objects as constellations are to stars, right? So basically we can, we can see the different aspects in comparison, and that can help us think about the different attributes of maybe when we think about, for example, a tomato with a pumpkin, maybe with an apple, with an avocado. We can think about the nutritional value. We can compare the taste, the texture, those kinds of things. So here's a little bit more about constellations. Adorno wants to gather objects and experiences into changing constellations. So compare this experience with that experience. Compare this tomato with that apple. Kind of like changing a trial combination, kind of like this combination lock. This is another way. So if we compare these things together, we're going to explore, and they will illuminate and contrast with each other. So through comparison, through contrasting things, we will understand them better. And this will enable us to even just momentarily see the object as it is. Through comparison, we can illuminate the object, if only to achieve momentary or partial insight, right? We won't understand it completely, but this will help us understand things better than just calling a tomato a plant. So how Adorno does non-identity thinking? Constellations. It's basically like we talked about, the tomato should be compared with the pumpkin, compared with avocado, compared with an orange. And together, thinking about these things, we can think about their attributes. We can think about their nutritional value, the taste, the sweetness, the texture, the color, the adjectives. And so by understanding it in relation to other objects, constellations, we kind of unlock. It's no longer hidden under the idea, the category of plant. We actually understand it a lot better because we're seeing it in context of the other vegetables and plants fruit. So this is another aspect of Adorno's utopia called negative ethics. So, right, we're focusing on what is missing. That's the negative, what is not there. So, what is bad should point us to what could be, what is right. So, what is missing should point us to what could be, the good. So, Adorno's ethics does not involve grasping a positive, something that is already there. It involves grasping an absent reality, something that is not there yet. It's an impulse towards a possibility. The impulse towards this possibility is a negative one. He's looking for what is not there. What thought might discern to be missing, but has no concrete form or content, right? So it's kind of like thinking, what's not there? That's kind of what we've been talking about this whole time. What's missing? What did we not, what could be better, right? It's like that. So it is only a negative mirror image, kind of like this, kind of like thinking about the opposite, thinking about the absence of what presently is, what ought not to be. A negative criticism of existing damaged life. So it's kind of also thinking about the damage that exists and thinks about, well, what if that damage were better? What if that damage were not there? It briefly illuminates a glimpse of the possibility of what life could be by thinking about the negative, right? What is points to what could be, the good. Right? The non-identical is not to be obtained directly as something positive. It's thought seeking to transcend its present limitations. This is Adorno's ethics or Adorno's utopia. Thought seeking to transcend its present limitations is what Adorno's negative critique of existing life entails, to go beyond our current limitations. So what does this mean? Right? So now we have a world where there is hunger. We have a world where there is domination. We have a world where we misunderstand each other, which leads to violence. So what does Adorno's negative utopia imagine? He imagines a world without hunger, a world where everybody has food. He imagines a world without domination, where we don't just ignore the possibility for violence and say, oh, we have pluralism, oh, we have equality, and we actually deny the possibility for violence. He hopes that we recognize the possibility for violence. And he hopes someday we can stop dominating each other and we can live side by side and see the world as it is. Utopia's negative utopia imagines the human spirit and impulse is not denied, where we can show compassion to poor people and we don't just relegate or delegate the kindness that we should show our neighbor to the government. People are not disconnected from their work. People are not disconnected from their hopes, right? Because work is so difficult and we see it as a sacrifice that we need to relax in order just to go back to work. We can actually pursue our hopes and our dreams, and we can do meaningful work that we find is purposeful. So those are parts of negative utopia. It's basically looking at the world as it truly is and seeing what is absent, what is not there, what could be, and imagining a better world through that. So in one of the examples of Adorno that I love is, what would be the utopia? What would be that perfect world that Adorno is seeking? He says, that would be cool if we could just do nothing like a beast and look at the sky and just be peaceful, kind of like this bear. We could just be in harmony with the water, with the sky, and just be peaceful. We don't always have to be making 10,000 clocks. We don't always have to be so tired that we need to just watch the Hollywood or all day and just to go back to work, right? No more dependence on stuff to solve problems, right? If we remember, like the picture of the K-pop and the J-pop, right? So as Adorno said, we feel like our problems could be solved by a product, right? If we have a new K-pop band or a new car or a new food or a new Starbucks drink, maybe our problems will go away. But hopefully Adorno imagines a world where we don't fix our problems by buying new stuff. We solve our problems by just thinking about them, by looking at them, right? We should see the horror so that we don't perpetuate it. We don't feel the need to constantly produce, right? Free humans would be able to endure silence. We could just be quiet and we could just be like this bear in the water, looking at the sky, just doing nothing. We could enjoy nature and not dominate it, right? Free humans would no longer do violence to themselves or their objects. They could just live together like the artist does. So anyway, thank you for listening. This is the lecture on Adorno, part 2 of Ideology-Utopia Critique. Thank you for watching. And please, if you have any questions about the bibliography, just send me an email. Thank you very much.